Okay. I
Okay.
have our recording going, and then I know a couple people have the read the transcript recording going on. So it is 12 o'clock my time, 1 o'clock your time. So we can go ahead and get started, Erin, if that's okay with you. Um, and for anyone who doesn't know, Erin is actually on our board. So she was our chair. Recently, she has changed to second vice chair. I'm sure you guys have seen her either at the Keep America Beautiful conference or our conferences. She's always around, always saying hi to everyone. So Erin, if you want, you can feel free to take it away.
Okay, hello everyone. My name's Erin Ballas. I'm president of Public Affairs Consultants, and I am your immediate past chair and your second vice chair on the board. I've been involved with Keep Florida Beautiful for probably 15 plus years. So before I came on the board, I helped Kina
Mm.
Corey, who was on the board, and we actually helped from the beginning when we kind of brought Keep Florida Beautiful back, and have been working to secure funding ever since. What I'm going to do today is we're going to talk about Florida election cycle. If you didn't already know it's election time, you must not own a television, a cell phone, or listen to the radio. Because wherever you go, whatever you're doing, you're hearing some kind of campaign ad where somebody is telling you that they are the best person for the job and that they're trying to garner your votes. The reason why this is important, it is directly tied to your state funding. And so we're going to go over that a little bit. We're going to talk about funding, we're going to talk about campaigns, and we're going to talk about the best practices for you and your organizations to make sure that that funding is secured and maintained. So, why does it matter? Well, last year the state legislature passed a balanced budget of about 117 plus billion dollars. So every one of those dollars is a specific line item that instructs the state of Florida how we're going to spend the money. The budget is done in a single bill, so that means both the House and the Senate, 160 members, have to all agree that all of these funding sources, all these funding individuals are important, and it's the only constitutionally required bill they have to do. They could literally do nothing else except this bill. And so it has to pass. It is the number one instructional tool that our state agencies use to know how to spend money. Um, every 2 years, the people in charge of that budget, so the appropriations or the budget chairman, change. And so every 2 years, we have two different individuals, two different personalities who are basically in charge of listening to all of the people of the state of Florida, all the elected officials, all the lobbyists, all the advocates, and making sure that they pass a balanced budget. And that is why it is so important to get involved in campaigns, because there are these things called term limits in Florida, which means that elected officials can't maintain their position in perpetuity. Eventually, they will have to leave that position and go on to something else. And so for most of them, they're there for about 8 years if they get elected every single cycle. In the Senate, there is a extenuating circumstance where they could be there for 10 years. But that's only in a redistricting time. And so it's really important to start to meet these candidates when they're first starting out, because you never know if in 6 years they might be in charge of the budget. All right, so the Florida budget, who's in charge? It's made up of the House and the Senate. The way that this process works is that the governor asks all his agencies in about September to come up with their picture perfect budget plan. They also do what's called a Series 10, which means that they go through the budget, they look at it, and they might, or excuse me, an Exercise 10, where they go and they say, these are the things we think we should cut, and then this is our perfect budget. So if I could spend this amount of money, this is what I would spend it on if I was in charge of just my division. And they do that presentation to the governor, and he takes all that in, him and his staff. And then after they take in that information, they create their own budget. Nowadays, the budget has a fancy name. It's sometimes called the Florida First budget. It's called the Florida Families First budget. When Governor Scott was in charge, it was the Get Back to Work budget. And so every year the governor comes to the legislature and he says, this is what I think is the best way to spend our dollar bucks. And this is what I view as the best way for me to accomplish all of my goals that I have for the year. And the legislature says, thank you so much. This is so much information. Thank you. We love it. And then they put it in a drawer and they do whatever they like. And so it's just a process that takes place. And then what will happen is the House and the Senate simultaneously will begin to work on their budgets. And so that means that the 120 members of the House and the 40 members of the Senate are working on what they view as the perfect way to spend our taxpayer dollars here in the state of Florida. All right, so who's in the Florida cabinet? This is important because they are up for re-election right now, all of them. There are two of them that are running for the first time in their positions, but are currently those cabinet members. And those two individuals are the Attorney General, who is James Utmeyer. He was appointed by the governor when our Attorney General became our senator, who the governor also appointed. And then our Chief Financial Officer is Blazin Goglia. He was a sitting senator. He moved into that position when Jimmy Patronis left his position as CFO to run for Congress and won. The governor is actually term limited, so that means that he has already served his 8 years as the governor, which means that we will have a new governor this year. And there are all types of different people who are running for that position right now. And then the Commissioner of Agriculture is also up for re-election. That's Wilton Simpson. He has been elected. This will be his second 4-year term if he is to get elected. All right, so I'm going to move this. Oh, no, go back. Here we go. So every cabinet seat is on the ballot, like I said. The governor, that's an open seat, which means that he will be leaving the position vacated, and there'll be a new chief executive of the state of Florida. The Attorney General, like I said, he is in a contested race. That means he is running against a Democrat. That race will be decided in the general. There's a Chief Financial Officer's race. He has a Democrat who is running against him as well, so that will be decided in the general election. And then the same as the Commissioner of Agriculture, he is running. So all of these individuals had to qualify by June 12th. The primary will take place August 18th, so that means that if there are two individuals in the same party, they will run against each other, and then that will determine who will run in the general. And then the general is November 3rd. All right, so the Florida House of Representatives currently there's 120 people who are elected for those positions. They run for 2 years, and they have 4 terms, so that means 8 consecutive years. If you step out of office, that timeline starts again. In order for there to be a majority, there needs to be 61 seats won, and so currently in the House of Representatives, we have what is called a supermajority, which means that they have more than the Republicans have more than 2/3 of the vote, and our incoming speaker will be a Republican by the name of Sam Garrison. And then in the Senate, we have 40 individuals, 20 are up for election. So it is outlined in the Constitution that the Senate shall never flip over completely. That means that 20 senators are up for re-election in 2026. The opposite 20 senators are up for re-election come 2028. They have 4-year term cycles because of that, and then some of them have an extra 2-year term because of the way that they have to kind of make sure that they never turn over the whole group of them. You need 21 seats for majority in this one. This math's a little better. But they currently have supermajority, and we have the first independent individual in the Senate as well. Jason Pizzo, 2 years ago, decided he was no longer going to be a Democrat or the Democratic leader and has now become an independent and is the first of his kind. So that's pretty exciting. And then the president designate is Jim Boyd. He will become the president after the elections, and we believe that they will maintain that Republican majority in the Senate as well. Okay, so this is your elections timeline. This is really important to know. So one, candidate qualifying already took place. So that's when we kind of knew all the individuals who were going to be running in the positions they have. If you were reading the news before June 12th, you had a very different idea of where people were running. As they came after June 12th, a lot of people moved positions, didn't run for re-election, left their current position, ran for another election. It was all over the place. But now everything's kind of settled. We know who the players are. The primary election will take place on August 18th. I think you still have maybe 2 days if you haven't registered to vote yet, or if you haven't checked your voter registration, I highly suggest you do so. Signatures can change, and that is something that you want to make sure is up to date because it can disqualify your votes if they don't match. But the primary election will take place on August 18th. You can reach out right now and you can get your vote by mail ballot. I already voted by mail. It was amazing. Came in, didn't have to pay the postage. It works out great. But the last day to vote in the primary is August 18th. This is where the parties choose their nominees to go into the general election. The general election will take place on November 3rd. That's when voters will decide the cabinet, the House, and the Senate. And then new terms will begin for our governor, all of the cabinet in January 2027. But for House and Senate members, it will actually take place 2 weeks after the election. They will all come up to Tallahassee, they'll be sworn in, and that will begin their tenure in their position. All right, so we're going to talk about a little more about the state budget and how it works. Like I said, it's a $117 billion state budget now. Just to give you an idea, when I started probably 19, 20 years ago, our budget was about $60 billion. And so year over year, the budget tends to grow at about 10% year over year. Now, we had some recessions in there, but that's what you tend to see. On June 29th, the governor was kind enough to finally sign the budget. He likes to wait till the very last minute. And this year, he vetoed about $810 million from the budget, which is a pretty substantial amount, largest amount that's ever been vetoed. But again, I would caution anyone to think that this is kind of a huge statement. If the budget goes up every year by 10%, it also allows you to veto about 10% a year. That kind of is what we've seen statistically happen year over year. Like I said, it has to be balanced, so we can't spend money we don't have here. We aren't Congress, we can't print more money, so we can only spend what we have coming in. It is the only must-pass bill, but this is a year-round process, and so what we're going to talk about right now is how you can start working on the budget issues right now and making sure that we can maintain the funding that Keep Florida Beautiful has, or if there's any more funding that you might want to go after. Like I said, we kind of talked about this a little more, but the agency starts their request in about July to submit to the governor. Then the governor does his proposal and he recommends the budget as a guideline to the legislative work that they'll do. What comes after that is that the House and the Senate members each will file budget requests. So if you are a non-reoccurring budget item, which means that the money that is spent on your project is money that isn't a foundational or recurring necessity in the state of Florida, then you have to have a member apply to or request those funds year over year. Keep Florida Beautiful currently has a recurring line item in the budget. We're very thankful. We worked pretty hard to get it there and secure it. And so every year we still go in, we still talk to members in order to maintain it, because even if you are a reoccurring line item, a great example is some of the Everglades funding. They are a reoccurring item, and this year a significant amount of their money was cut. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that you're safe. You still need to maintain your relationships and you still need to do the work to make sure that you're maintaining the budget. After your budget proposal goes in, then committees begin to draft their respective chambers' budgets. And so the House will do theirs and the Senate will do theirs. Sometimes they look similar, sometimes they look completely different. And then what they do is they move their budgets through the committee process so that it's ready for the floor. Once the budgets are ready for the floor, each respective chamber will debate what their chamber has determined is the best way to spend those funds. Once they've debated it, they vote on their budgets and essentially go make a procedural motion to strip off what they've done, all their hard work, and then motion to go into what's conference. And so conference is where the House and the Senate will sit down together and will meet and discuss all the line items in the budget and determine what they can agree needs to be spent collectively. This process is a interesting process because budget conference meetings are noticed on 1 hour. So the public is only given an hour to basically see what the senators and the House members have done, and get to the Capitol to hear kind of what they're going to talk about. A lot of the budget negotiating takes place behind closed doors. And so this is when you really have to lean on the relationships you've built with members to ensure that your projects remain funded and safe. Once all that is done, the budget is put on the desks of the House and the Senate members. It's given a 72-hour cooling off period. This is a tradition that we have had in the state of Florida for many, many years, and it dates back to when they literally used to have to let the ink dry on it, and they had to keep it in the back of each chamber because there was only one copy of the budget, and they wanted to allow people to be able to review it before they voted on it. And so this is a carryover from that. What actually happens is an email is sent to every member, a button is pushed, that starts the 72-hour time clock, and then procedurally what we do is we kind of ask questions and debate, and then when the 72 hours ends, that's when the respective chambers will vote. Once all that is done, then the budget is then packaged up. I like to pretend they like clean it up, they make it look all pretty, and then they send it down to the governor for him to sign. If it's during session, he has 7 days to approve it. If it's outside of session, once he receives the bill, he has 14 days to approve it. This is the only bill that he has line item veto ability on, which means that he can go through and he can say no to this, and then everything else, he can draw lines through things, and basically the bill will become law, but the parts he draws lines through will be removed from the budget. And so it's the only bill he's allowed to do that on. There is a way that the chambers can override his vetoes. It takes 2/3 votes in both the House and the Senate. That would allow them to basically say, nope, we passed a perfect bill and we don't believe that the governor's vetoes are appropriate, and so we're going to override it. Last year, the House did vote to override one of the governor's vetoes that the Senate then agreed to, which had to do with the arts and the arts funding, and that money was then put back into the budget and was spent this year. But that's the only one we've seen so far. All right, where our funding fits in. So the legislator must sponsor it. Because we're a reoccurring fund, we don't have a legislator sponsor it on our behalf. But like I said, if you are a new project, you do need a legislator in both the House and the Senate to submit it. It goes through multiple subcommittees, so wherever your funding comes from, so that means the department that oversees it. So for us, that would be the Department of Transportation. It goes through that subcommittee. So ours is under TED, which is Transportation Economic Development, Appropriations, and Budget. They look at it, they look at that portion of the budget, and they say, yep, this all looks great. And then leadership decides if it qualifies. So the House and the Senate get to look at what projects they like, and then they determine what ultimately goes in. If it survives conference and the veto, then you become law, and that's how you get your funding in the end in the state of Florida. Not too complicated. But why are elections so important for our funding? Well, I'll tell you why. Because elections pick the budget writers. So if you are thinking to yourself, whatever, it's just a House member, it's just a senator, you're thinking about it all wrong. That elected official, and that becomes one of your major donors. They are the individuals who determine how taxpayer dollars are used. And right now, one of the things that they determine is that state payer tax dollars are important to be used for Keep Florida Beautiful and to maintain to maintain that funding is important to us. And so whoever wins could down the line become a subcommittee chair, a full committee chair, and they are the individuals who get to decide how our funding is done. So the other thing that's important to remember is that every year, term limits reset the relationships. So this year, Chair McClure in the House and Chair Hooper in the Senate were in charge of all of the money, all of it. They make the choices on that. They work with their speaker and the president respectively, but their job is to negotiate the budget. Both of them are done. Chair Hooper has decided to retire, and Chair McClure is done. He's term limited, and he's not running for the Senate. So that means that if they were our champions are gone. And so what you have to do is make sure that there's another champion who's coming in behind them to make sure that the funding is maintained for years down the road. And that's why open seats are great, because they can create brand new champions. They can create brand new individuals who are really empowered and love Keep Florida Beautiful and love the affiliates and want to do what they can to protect that funding when they come up to Tallahassee. But you got to build those relationships before they get into office. And then a sponsor is ultimately the individual who makes the funding possible. And so without friendly legislators, without individuals who are ready to go into the back room and push for our funding on our behalf, I can't go into a member lounge. I can't go into where they have lunch. And honestly, at a certain point, they don't want you in their office anymore either. But we want to make sure that those relationships that you guys are building and that I have built help maintain our funds as they move through the process. So what's the difference between advocacy versus lobbying? I wanted to talk about this a little bit because we have both, right? We have government affiliates and we have private affiliates, and so there's some difference between it. But what you're doing on Keep Florida Beautiful's behalf is you're advocating. This is broadly permitted. It helps you educate elected officials on issues. You share your local impact, your data, and your stories. You build a year-round relationship with them. So you're going to keep them in the loop on all the things you're doing in your community. You're going to invite them to things. You're going to make sure that they know about every event that you have going on. And then you're going to invite the officials to see your hard work firsthand. So you're going to invite them out to every cleanup. A great example, Debbie Mayfield, she is a senator, she sends out a newsletter for a very, very long time. I'm pretty sure Keep Florida Beautiful was included in Keep Brevard Beautiful, whatever event they had going on, she included it in her newsletter. What is a little different is lobbying. That's where you pay an individual to come up to Tallahassee and to do all this for you. We don't have one of those because you have board members who are up here doing it, but you are allowed to advocate for your affiliate in any way you would like. All right, so this is about building relationships that last. So this is a fabulous example. This is a past board member, Steve Lesman. And this is the new Senate president, is Jim Boyd. This is him receiving an award for Keep Florida Beautiful. You want to know your delegation. You want to know your House members. You want to know your senators who are from your county, your district, your area. You want to invite them to bring them to officials to cleanups and to events so that they can see the impact in person. If they don't come, they'll send staff. You might actually get some extra volunteers, which is great. You want to lead with your local story. So you want to pair a community story with the clear numbers of what your organization is doing. So this area of the beach was completely covered in litter. We did 4 cleanups here. We hauled this many tons of garbage, this many tons of this many tons of this. This is the direct impact that the funding that the state gives down to us. We were able to make this happen. And then you want to be a year-round resource. So you want to follow up. You want to send thank you notes. You want to engage their staff. We're not going to do it just when they're in session. All year round, every month, you're just going to check in. You're going to keep them on your email list, and then you can become a resource back to them. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a member staff who's like, well, we really want to do a cleanup in this area, and connected them with their local affiliate to make that happen. Those type of building relationships are an excellent way to build strength, so that you can have relationships that go the long haul during the legislative process. All right, so this is the playbook. This is the way to break it down for you. So it's nice and easy in your head. You can screenshot it. I'll share the deck with everyone so you can see it as well. So before the election, so right now, you want to look at the candidates in your county or in your area. You can attend forums. You can introduce yourself. You can introduce the organization to them. You can invite them to events. And then during session, you're going to continue to build relationships in your district. So that means you're still inviting them to do all the events. Maybe you go and see them once in a while. Maybe you go to one of their events. Maybe you go to a delegation meeting where you go and you talk about Keep Florida Beautiful funding. Those are all great ways, and we share with Sherry exactly when those delegation meetings are. They're super easy to go to. You get to talk for about 2 seconds, but you can run them through what you're doing, what your organization does, and maybe what your next event is. When required, so if you get an email from Sherry, it's probably from me panicking saying you've got to come up to Tallahassee, you need to come see your member. But what we really would prefer is that you have a strong enough relationship with your elected official that you have their cell phone number and you can just text them or call them. And then in a lot of instances, we want to be able to share a one-page like impact briefing or so. This is what Keep Tallahassee Beautiful does. Here's the impact to the community, and here's how it relates to Keep Florida Beautiful
Bless
funding.
you.
Thank you so much for your continued support of Keep Florida Beautiful. And then year round, we want you to always send thank you notes and impact reports. So anytime you do a report, anytime you get an award, anytime you get some positive press, share that with your elected officials, share that with the candidates. You want to keep the relationship bipartisan. So I know I walked through and said that the majority of the supermajority in both the House and the Senate right now is Republican, but if your elected officials are Democrats, if your elected officials are Republicans, if your elected official is an independent, it doesn't matter. Everybody wants to make sure that Florida is beautiful. Nobody wants to swim in trash at the beach. Nobody wants to see trash on the side of the road. This is really important for every Floridian across, no matter what party you're in. And then you want to track engagement across the network. So you want to make sure that they see your socials, you see their socials, you go back and forth, and you can build your relationships that way as well. And that's it. It was pretty quick. Sorry. But now we have it. We can open it up and we can have some conversation. I'm happy to help in any way. Like I said, the other thing I didn't talk about, and I should have, is I should have talked a little bit more about the fact that these people are just people. As long as you are kind to them and you treat them like a major donor, those are the two things I want you to take with you when you go in to meet with them, when you talk to them, when you talk to their staff. One of the biggest things that we want to tell you because of term limits is that staff often become the elected, and then they become a bigger elected and they move on to Congress. But right now we have about, I can't even count how many members of the legislature who literally used to be staffers. And so, and they remember who was nice to them and they remember who was kind. And so they are also the most important part because they're making sure that the elected official is ending up where they need to be and remembering what they need to be. And so being really kind to the staff as well can be very helpful in the future. So I'm going to open it up. If anyone has any questions, I'm here, you got me, and we can go from there.
Yep, and you guys can feel free to unmute and ask a question. If you want to pop it in the chat, you can. If you want to raise your hand, do that. Andrea, I see your hand up.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Andrea. I'm from the village of Palmetto Bay, South Florida, within Miami-Dade County, southern Miami-Dade County. And it's more, I guess, like of a comment. So we have a village council, just to give you an idea. Um, Suburban type of coastal area. We have a lot of sub-basin projects that need federal funding, state funding as well. We've received. And our village council has always gone to Tallahassee. We have lobbyists. We have those good relationships with our representatives and our senators. Um, and I will say, I guess this past fiscal year has been definitely odd. Um, very, very odd. Um, our council met with senators. We were guaranteed certain monies for sub-basin projects. Um, Guaranteed, we'll say. And then the governor, you said, has the right to veto and vetoed all of ours. And so, we have those relationships with our senators. We are nice, we are grateful. And I would just say that unfortunately, we just live in weird times, I guess. And, I don't know if I'm maybe saying too much, but I don't know if you have any advice for anything moving forward in terms of how we can get around because. Um, Lack of funding is concerning, at least going forward. Less federal opportunities, less state opportunities. So, and now this property tax thing is something different in terms of where are we going to get the money to continue what we're doing. So, no, it's a loaded question, but yeah.
No, and so because y'all are in Miami, correct?
Yeah, Miami-Dade
Miami-Dade.
County.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So you are a cautionary tale of what happens sometimes when legislators don't get along with certain people. And you're not the only one who felt it. I think pretty much all of Miami-Dade felt the veto pen pretty aggressively. And that is based on personalities. And that is unfortunate. I think you're going to do great next year. So you can't do
I don't
worse.
know.
So next year will hopefully go better. But what you did talk about is important as well. For some of our government affiliates, um, you have a really difficult election cycle ahead of you because one of the things that will happen in the general election is that the constitutional amendment on property taxes will be included. And that will be difficult. I don't want to use the word crippling. I mean, other people have. But the passage of that has to be at 60% of the state of Florida to basically get rid of property taxes in a kind of sliding scale way. And that will be something we will have to figure out, not just the people on this call, but the state will have to determine it. I think a lot more elected officials are suddenly realizing, oh, this is going to fall on us, which could impact a lot of funding. The other thing that we as a state haven't talked about, but the legislature and their budget projections have been talking about for years is that the state of Florida is anticipating a shortfall in our budget due to state employee health insurance, and that the anticipation in that tripling, they think, in 2027, and that every year they were told you have to do something, you have to do something, and they haven't done anything yet. And so, what will that result in the budget? So, what I would say is you want to maintain those relationships. You want to it's kind of like when it rains, it pours, and then it's kind of a dribble for a little while. And so I think, especially in Miami-Dade, a lot of individuals were like, oh boy, like we've got a speaker, everything's going to be great. I think at one point I heard somebody say we're going to back up the truck for Miami-Dade. And then some other personality issues came up, and the truck was backed up, and then it was promptly impounded. And so I think that those issues are outside your control. That's really the truth. I mean, like you
That's the
can lead
whole
a horse
thing.
to
Yeah.
water, yeah, but you can't make them drink. And so, sometimes the legislator you bet on gets in trouble, or you know, says the wrong thing, or stands up for his community, and then there's some retribution down the line from either other individuals. So it's a complicated process, but on the upside, it's not a process that AI can take over. And so you have to continue to build those relationships. You'll have some new members coming in. We know we've interviewed quite a few of them, and they're wonderful. And we think they'll move up through leadership quite well. But the good news I have to say for you is that in a couple of years, you'll have another speaker from Miami-Dade, and so there might be a chance to kind of help with that. But I think you just continue working with your members. You continue working with them. I would also diversify. If I was talking like to the whole group, it doesn't hurt to know members from other districts. It doesn't hurt to build those relationships or to partner up with another group. So if you're coming in from the village of Palmetto, you could meet, and you and the Coral Gables organization could sit down with the member together. You know, it's better to kind of show a united front with members. But I would just say hang on, hang in there, and you know what, you can always call me, and we can spill the tea about what's going on and why people can't just all be nice to each other and be quiet. But
Yeah,
that's how it
I
goes. It makes
appreciate
you feel
it.
better. I lost the Miami-Dade funding too, and
Yeah,
it was rough. But sometimes you can't help it in this process.
yeah, appreciate
Okay.
it though.
Yeah. I saw there was another question in the chat. Hold on, let me see what it is.
There's two.
How can we learn more? Okay, how can we learn more about candidates and their stance on environmental issues besides campaign websites? Are there certain groups who sponsor candidates who we should keep an eye out for? But a good and interesting question. So here's what I would say. I wouldn't think of yourselves as an environmental group when you're talking to a legislator. What I would think of myself as when I talk to a legislator is Keep Florida Beautiful is the state litter collection organization. So we are recognized in statute as that. So when you talk to them as an affiliate of Keep Florida Beautiful, you are talking to them as a state symbol. And sometimes we have to remind them of that because it's really, really far down in the statutes, and they don't have it hanging up on the wall. We're not key lime pie. And so I wouldn't talk to them as an environmentalist. What I would talk to them about is say, listen, for tourism, we want to make sure there's no trash on the road. For our community, we want to make sure that there's no litter. And so maybe when it comes to thinking about environmental issues, what we need to do is step back a little, and instead, when you're talking to a candidate, think specifically about funding and maintaining those funds, and the way that we do that as a state symbol, specifically in statute. If that didn't answer your question, you can follow up, but that would be my answer to that. And then can we talk a little bit about how county elected officials interact with those in the state and how we can use that relationship? What a good question. A great example right now is that county elected officials often run for the state and then almost immediately forget that they were county elected officials. It's crazy how that can happen. They're the same people that come up and talk about home rule 2 years later will get elected as a state representative and carry a bunch of bills that are anti-home rule, and it always surprises me. But what I would say is that county elected officials do know their state local electeds quite well. And those relationships can be great if they sit on your board. And this is a great conversation to have if you're building a board right now. Having a state elected official or their staff or their significant others on your board is great. It's super smart. It's super strategic. The other thing I would say is that you could come up on a county day. So a lot of counties have specific days they come up to Tallahassee and they see their members. If you want to join them or you're coming up with their county, go in with their electeds and talk about Keep Florida Beautiful and talk about the local affiliates and be with a county elected who is also a advocate for you. That's great. Electeds love hearing from other electeds about an organization that they're really passionate about. Is there any word about an active Keep Broward Beautiful chapter? That's not a question for me.
Yes, there is. I'll put the information in the chat.
Excellent. Perfect. Are there any other questions? Okay, so here's the thing. If you think of them, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. You can text me, you can call me, you can send me an email. If you are coming to Tallahassee with your county, would you please let me know? And then I'll be happy to help you too in the Capitol. I can help you make appointments or get you where you need to go. It's kind of an overwhelming building, Sherry can tell you. But what we also try and do is we have the board come up and try and meet with members as well. I don't want anyone on here thinking that you're facing the burden all by yourself. The board is charged with also maintaining relationships and developing them with more with newly elected officials. Sherry is constantly coming up here and doing it, and we've been doing it for years in order to secure that funding. But like I said, no funding is safe. We feel safe for, I mean, they'll go after anyone if they need the funds, and this year will be no different. Especially if we do pass that constitutional amendment. I do think there'll be some robust conversations around, will the state of Florida end up having to backfill those funds? What will happen to the smaller counties, the counties that don't have the funds? What happens to cities who don't have the funds anymore? And so we are not the only ones who feel concerned over that. So Andrea, don't feel bad. The police chiefs have all come out against it. The fire chiefs have all come out against it. Every city and county has come out against it. And so now it's just making sure that we educate the electorate on what exactly your local taxes do for you and why they are important for community growth and building. And for those of you who do keep Florida Beautiful or keep any local government affiliate, also sharing with your area what you do and how you do it. But I cannot thank you guys enough. All I have to do is secure the funds. You guys do the real work. You are the ones who are making sure that the Keep Florida Beautiful state symbol for litter collection, which is the funniest one I think, is really taking place here. You're keeping Florida absolutely gorgeous, and I just can't thank you enough for all your hard work. It is a pleasure to serve on this board because I see every day all the hard work you put in and everything you do. And I just can't thank you enough. So thanks for joining us today. I hope I didn't bore you. But if you have any questions, if they come up later, please reach out to me. But like I said, it's an absolute pleasure to get to be on this board and be a part of this board and represent you in the Capitol.
Erin, are you okay with me putting your email in the chat for everyone to grab?
Yes, my email and my cell. Here, I'll even put my cell.
So everyone, if you're still here, go ahead and grab her email. She just dropped her cell in the chat, so you can have both. I'll also put both of them in a follow-up email for everyone, along with the recording of this, so that you can go through it whenever you want again and kind of refresh your memory. Erin, everyone always has nothing but amazing things to say about every presentation you do. So I hope you realize how important these are for everyone and how much you're making a difference to all of them and helping with confidence to even talk to representatives. So I just want to tell you how much we all appreciate you and you taking the time to do this.
Oh, well, thank you. You guys have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.